9:47 hours, January 14th, 2026. At Pituffik Space Base on the northwestern coast of Greenland, a sensor operator watching a passive tracking display saw something that made him reach for the direct line to Northern Command without pausing to verify. On his screen, a contact signature that had been building for 11 minutes had just resolved into a confirmed track. 33,000 tons of Russian nuclear-powered steel, the icebreaker Arctica, cutting through sea ice at the edge of Greenland's exclusive economic zone, 18 kilometers from the capital Nuuk. Not loitering on the boundary, inside it, moving with purpose at a heading that pointed directly toward Danish territorial waters and the NATO radar installation that Russia has publicly identified as the primary obstacle to its Arctic freedom of maneuver. This was not an accident of navigation. The Arctica's captain knew exactly where the EEZ boundary was. Moscow had calculated this moment down to the week, the period immediately before February 2026, when questions about NATO funding levels and American commitment to Article 5 guarantees were generating maximum uncertainty across the alliance. If there was ever a moment to test how far Russia could push before the West pushed back, the Kremlin strategists had decided this was it. Turn the Greenland Sea into a sovereignty dispute on Moscow's terms. Demonstrate the Yasen-M submarine platform's operational reach to Chinese strategic partners watching from a careful distance. And above all, prove that U.S. plans to upgrade the Golden Dome radar architecture at Pituffik could be contested at the source. That Washington's own front doorstep was not beyond Russia's reach. Two Danish F-35 A Block 4 fighters scrambled from Thule Air Base within 4 minutes of the contact alert. Each aircraft represents roughly $110 million in acquisition cost and the most sophisticated onboard avionics suite currently fielded by any Western Air Force. Both became functionally useless 50 kilometers from the Arctica. Russia's Murmansk BN electronic warfare system, the same shipborne jamming platform that NATO electronic intelligence assets had tracked moving into the area 48 hours earlier, activated its full-spectrum denial mode, projecting a jamming bubble approximately 100 kilometers in radius centered on the Arctica's position. GPS navigation for both F-35s dropped to zero simultaneously. The aircraft's terrain reference navigation and inertial backup systems kept them airborne and oriented, but their sensor integration, targeting architecture, and data link connectivity to the Link 16 network all degraded within seconds. Two of the most capable fighter aircraft on Earth were reduced to visual range platforms in an environment where visual range in Arctic conditions is measured in hundreds of meters. The pilots turned back. There was no tactically rational alternative. Russia had just demonstrated, in real time and in front of every intelligence collection asset that NATO had positioned in the region, that it could neutralize an entire F-35 squadron without firing a weapon. That message was directed as much at Beijing as at Brussels. The HMS Glasgow, the Royal Navy's lead Type 26 City-class frigate, was conducting anti-submarine exercises 40 nautical miles southwest of Nuuk when the emergency tasking arrived. The Type 26 represents the most capable surface anti-submarine warfare platform in the Western inventory, built specifically around the Type 2 087 variable depth sonar system, a towed array configuration capable of detecting submarine contacts at ranges that remain classified but are described informally by operators as being able to distinguish whale-breathing patterns at 50 miles. The Glasgow came to flank speed and closed the gap. At 8 kilometers from the Arctica, the Type 2087 returned an echo signature below the surface. The Glasgow's commander, operating under rules of engagement that permitted warning action short of lethal force, authorized the deployment of a single Mk-54 lightweight torpedo configured for acoustic detonation only. No warhead, maximum noise. The intent was unambiguous, a pressure pulse warning telling whatever was below to surface and identify. What answered was not what anyone aboard the Glasgow had expected. The warning torpedo had not traveled 400 meters before the Glasgow's passive sonar suite began screaming, "Torpedo in the water." Bearing 000. The contact was not surface-launched. It originated from 150 meters below the sea surface, from a position that the Glasgow sensors had assessed as clear seconds earlier. The Yasen-M nuclear attack submarine Kazan, the Northern Fleet's most advanced boat, a vessel whose pump jet propulsion system and an echoic hull coating had made it effectively invisible to every passive sonar sweep the Glasgow had run during its approach, had been lying in the Glasgow's patrol corridor for an undetermined period. Its captain had not requested authorization from Moscow. He responded on his own initiative, torpedo for torpedo, tit for tat. The weapon that left the Kazan's tube was a 53 to 65K heavyweight torpedo, approximately 2 tons of shaped charge and propulsion, armed not for full detonation but for proximity fuse activation, designed to detonate close enough to create catastrophic pressure effects without direct hull penetration. It detonated 400 meters off the Glasgow's bow. The water column that erupted was 30 meters high. The pressure wave that preceded it traveled at the speed of sound through salt water, roughly 1,500 meters per second, and hit the Glasgow's composite sonar dome before any crew member had processed that the weapon had detonated. The dome, housing the active sonar transducers that gave the Type 26 its underwater awareness, was destroyed on contact. The Glasgow's anti-submarine capability ceased to exist in that instant. The ship was undamaged in terms of propulsion and crew safety, but it had been surgically blinded. It drifted, its most essential defensive system shattered, in water that Russia now controlled acoustically. 3 new radar contacts appeared on the Glasgow's surface search display almost immediately. Approaching from the north in a spread formation, 3 Okean-class Project 22,100 border patrol vessels operating under the flag of the Russian Federal Security Service. 90-meter hulls, armed but classified as law enforcement rather than military assets. The legal constraint was precise and deliberate. Under Colreg's Rule 18, naval vessels operating under military authority are prohibited from taking aggressive action against vessels conducting law enforcement duties. Russia had brought law enforcement ships to a confrontation where firing on them would expose NATO to an internationally untenable legal position, while those same ships physically blocked the Glasgow's route toward the safety of Nuuk's harbor. Surface blocked, underwater blind, air denied by jamming. The Kazan sat at 150 meters below the thermocline that bent sonar energy back toward the surface before it could reach the submarine's depth. Acoustically invisible to every sensor, the Glasgow still had functioning. Moscow's trap had closed from 3 directions simultaneously. Think about what the NATO commander in that situation is looking at. Every conventional response has been foreclosed. An attack on the FSB vessels triggers an international legal crisis. A torpedo shot into water where the Kazan's position is unknown risks missing entirely and demonstrating impotence. Retreat means accepting that Russia has just established a precedent, that it can park a nuclear attack submarine in Danish territorial waters, destroy a NATO surface combatant's primary sensor, and face no meaningful consequence. Neither option is acceptable. Which means the solution has to come from somewhere the Russian planning staff didn't adequately account for. At Patufic, American technicians powered up a system that had been installed during a facility upgrade program that received almost no public attention. The relocatable over-the-horizon radar, designation REL-6, does not function like the radar systems that Russia's Murmansk BN jamming bubble was designed to suppress. Conventional radar travels line of sight. Its range is bounded by the curvature of the Earth, and its signals propagate at frequencies susceptible to the kind of broadband denial that had neutralized the Danish F-35s. The REL-6 uses the ionosphere as a reflective layer, bouncing high-frequency radar energy off the upper atmosphere and back down to the ocean surface at ranges exceeding 3,000 kilometers. It is physically immune to local electronic jamming because it doesn't operate within the jamming bubble. It operates above it, using the sky as a mirror. The REL-6's AI signal processing suite, upgraded 18 months prior, had been trained on a specific problem, detecting the surface disturbance signatures created by large submerged objects moving at depth. A 13,000-ton submarine at 150 meters doesn't vanish into the ocean. Its mass displaces water. Its propulsion creates pressure gradients. Its movement generates a faint surface expression, a long, low scar in the wave pattern that lasts for minutes after the submarine has passed. At sufficient sensor resolution, that scar is readable. The REL-6 read it. The Kazan's position resolved to coordinate 72 degrees, 16 minutes north, 55 degrees, 32 minutes west, depth estimated at 220 meters. That data was encrypted and transmitted via very low-frequency link, the only communication channel capable of penetrating the Murmansk BN jamming field because VLF signals propagate through seawater rather than across it, and no surface-based jamming system affects them. The P-8A Poseidon that had launched from Thule on an inertial navigation profile, flying without GPS through the jamming envelope, received the targeting package and had a confirmed position on the most advanced submarine in the Russian Navy. The P-8A crew's first response was not a weapon, it was geometry. 88 AFDSVQ active sonobuoys deployed in a checkerboard pattern across a 20 by 20 kilometer box centered on the Kazan's last known position. Each buoy activated simultaneously, flooding the target zone with multi-static sonar pulses from every direction at once. Not a single ping that the Kazan's crew could hear coming from one bearing, but a spherical acoustic assault that hit every surface of the submarine's hull at the same moment. The anechoic coating that made the Kazan acoustically stealthy against single-source passive sonar was not engineered for multi-static attack. The target lock was confirmed in seconds. The weapons bay opened. A Mk-48A DCAP heavyweight torpedo dropped into the Arctic water, wire-guided with a physical copper link connecting it to the weapons officer aboard the P-8A. Immune to every acoustic jamming system the Kazan could deploy because the guidance signal traveled down a wire rather than through water. The torpedo ran to 220 meters at 55 knots, guided by a human operator, watching its sensor feed in real time. It passed the Kazan's command tower at less than 50 meters and pulled away. The whine of the Mk-48's water jet propulsion reverberating through the Kazan's hull at that distance is a sound that submarine crews train to identify and dread. There is no ambiguity in that sound. It means a weapon has your solution, close to killing range, and chose not to kill you. The message is more precise than any radio transmission. We know exactly where you are. You are alive because we decided you should be. The Kazan's captain was not a man who surfaced on the first warning. He ordered the emergency decoy release, 12 MG-74 Courant acoustic devices, sophisticated enough to replicate the Yasin M's specific propulsion harmonics, propeller cavitation frequencies, and hull echo profile. The P-8A's targeting display went from 1 contact to 13, each moving in a different direction, each acoustic signature consistent with a Yasin M-class submarine. The AI tracking system flagged the ambiguity and paused automated target designation. For roughly 90 seconds, the Kazan's captain had created genuine confusion. In that window, the Kazan executed a sharp course change, cut all propulsion, and drifted into a seabed trench using the irregular rock formation to break up its acoustic return and mask its position in the natural seismic background noise of the Arctic floor. It was a well-trained response, executed correctly. Physics ended it. The P-8A descended to 60 meters above the wave surface, an operationally dangerous altitude in Arctic blizzard conditions, a maneuver that requires precise instrument flying and accepts real risk to the aircraft and crew. The magnetic anomaly detector extended from the aircraft's tail section, its sensor array measuring distortions in the Earth's magnetic field as the aircraft swept the search pattern. The MG-74 decoys are small metal cylinders, each weighing a few kilograms. They produce magnetic signatures measurable in nanoteslas. The Kazan is 13,000 tons of high-tensile steel. At 220 meters, through Arctic seawater, through the seabed trench the captain had chosen as cover, the MAD sensor registered a distortion in the local magnetic field that no decoy in any Navy's inventory could replicate. 1 contact. Confirmed ferrous mass consistent with Yasin M class. Bearing 300. The weapon this time was not a torpedo. A SUS charge, signal underwater sound, dropped directly above the Kazan's position. The device is small, inexpensive, and produces an acoustic shockwave equivalent to a shaped explosive charge detonating adjacent to the hull. No structural damage, catastrophic sensory effect. The blast temporarily saturated every passive hydrophone and sonar receiver aboard the Kazan, leaving the crew acoustically blind in waters where the seabed topography made blind navigation at depth genuinely dangerous. The submarine's inertial navigation was shaken. Its sonar, its primary awareness of the environment surrounding it, went white. The captain ran the arithmetic. His vessel was acoustically located, magnetically confirmed, and surrounded by a sonobuoy field that could direct another wire-guided Mk-48 to his exact position within seconds. His sonar was down. He was in a trench with no reliable chart data for the rock formations on either side. If he held position, he risked a grounding that would kill his crew. If he maneuvered blind, he risked the same. And the Americans had demonstrated twice that they could find him regardless of what he did. At 10:45 hours, high-pressure air vented into the Kazan's ballast tanks. The submarine rose. The surface of the Danish exclusive economic zone, fractured as 13,000 tons of Russian steel, broke through, black against gray Arctic sky, exposed in full to the surveillance aircraft that had been orbiting at altitude since before the torpedo passed its tower. A Yasen M-class nuclear attack submarine forced to the surface in NATO-claimed waters, in breach of Danish sovereignty, its presence irrefutable, and its violation documented by every optical and electronic sensor the P-8A carried. There is no classified euphemism for what that image represents in naval diplomacy. It is the operational equivalent of a confession. The Arctica and the 3 FSB Border Patrol vessels read the situation correctly. Without the Kazan subsurface threat, the surface formation had no tactical leverage. All 4 vessels turned north and began their transit back toward Russian waters without broadcast, without announcement, without any communication that NATO intercept assets were able to attribute to command authority in Moscow. The aftermath settled into its costs. The HMS Glasgow required towing to port. Sonar dome replacement on a Type 26 is not a dockside repair. It is a months-long dry dock operation measured in millions of pounds and the temporary removal of the Royal Navy's most capable ASW asset from active service. NATO reviewed the confrontation and recognized with uncomfortable clarity how close the outcome had come to being different. Without the REL-6 and the VLF data link, the Kazan stays invisible. Without the MAD pass-through Arctic weather conditions, the decoys work. Remove either capability from the equation and the Glasgow remains blind and blocked while a Russian nuclear submarine holds position in Danish territorial waters indefinitely. The Kremlin's analysts read the same after-action picture from the other direction. The OTH radar capability at Pituffik, which NATO had not previously demonstrated in an operational context, is now a known variable in Russian Arctic planning. The multi-static sonobuoy tactics, the wire-guided approach at depth, the mad descent through jamming conditions, all of it is now catalogued. Moscow knows more about NATO's Arctic ASW kill chain than it did before the Arctica crossed the EEZ boundary. That intelligence cost was the price of forcing the Kazan to surface. And whether it was worth paying is a question that the Pentagon's own after-action review is still working through. The Arctic has not stabilized. It has been redefined. What Russia established that it can deploy a Yasen M in Danish territorial waters, disable the Type 26's primary sensor system, and contest NATO's air superiority envelope through shipborne jamming, does not disappear because the Kazan surfaced. What NATO established, that it can locate and corner a Yasen M even below the thermocline, even through a full-spectrum jamming environment, even when the submarine deploys its most sophisticated decoy package, does not disappear either. Both sides added to the other's threat assessment. Both sides expose capabilities that cannot now be unexposed. The question that genuinely divides military analysts who have reviewed this engagement is whether the decision to activate the REL-6 and demonstrate the OTH radar's resolution capability against a submerged contact was the right call. Saving the Glasgow and forcing the Kazan to surface are real tactical gains, showing Moscow exactly what Pituffik can see, and proving that the ionospheric radar can track a submerged Yasen M through its surface expression is a different kind of cost. You spend a capability the moment you use it. The Kremlin's engineers now have a specific engineering problem to solve: how to suppress the surface signature that the REL-6 detected. They will work that problem. Was revealing that card worth the tactical result it produced? The Arctic corridor is not going to get quieter while that question gets answered. Drop your analysis in the comments. The trade-off between immediate operational success and long-term intelligence advantage is one of the genuinely hard problems in modern deterrence, and there is no consensus position among the people who actually run these decisions. If this breakdown added depth to how you read Arctic security competition, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The next file covers what the Pituffik upgrade program actually included beyond the OTH radar, and some of what's there hasn't been publicly connected to this confrontation yet.